everyone. This is Paul Casey, the Kenpo Karate Hall of Fame educational video series, where we speak to the Hall of Fame members and we talk a little bit about Kenpo, past, present, future. We talk about principles, concepts, their personal interpretation. And today we are truly honored to have Master Marty Zaninovich talking about one of the most deadliest things in our world, the knife. So, with no further ado, hello, Marty. Welcome.
Paul, how are you?
It's great.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Well, there was such a demand the last time you were on that we decided let's just focus in on what you do well, okay? And that is the use and defense concepts and principles, teaching of the blade. So before we go any further, for those that are not sure your experience and whatnot, why don't you just give us a brief overview of your history in the martial arts?
Quick overview. I grew up in the Labounty lineage, came up through there through my black belt. I switched over to Richard Huck Planus after that, who I'm still with. And in the interim with Mr. Planus, I studied with his brother, Ed Planus, which he was a guru under the Cabarwan system, which is a Filipino martial art. And then Mr. Planus taught me also, Huck Planus taught me also the Filipino arts. Then I gravitated over to the Inosanto Academy, been over there for a little over 20 years, and played with the Dog Brothers in the full contact stick fighting for about 2.5 years. And that was enough. That was a little painful at times. But I continue to learn, and doors keep opening with an educational stream coming through on the knife awareness and the do's and don'ts of it. But that's a quick overview right now. And I am an instructor, as you asked, under the Inosanto system in the Filipino martial arts, the Silat, and the JKD.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Why don't you give us now a brief history of the knife, its start, its evolution, the use, how it has come to be something we actually praise, use, and fear?
That's a great question. It originally started out at the beginning of time, and they used it for hunting. They used it for a tool. They used it for a myriad of different things, and they could use it as a weapon if needed, but it came as a tool, number one. And as time progressed on past, and they say the artifacts come up from the Homo sapien times, just reading what's been recorded on that, they started out with a stone. It evolved to the copper, to the bronze and tin era, and before the iron era started out after that, and evolved on from that point. And then to this day, it's gotten to a level of just unbelievable quality. And I think that's where the people like Mr. Hibben and the likes of him come into play, because they've designed just great knives. I'm not a knife maker, and I don't claim to be, but I've taken another path on that too. If you ask me the time, hopefully I'll get you an answer on that.
Well, we'll have Mr. Hibben during the Q&A. Him and his sons have actually taken over and continued the family business. But we'll discuss that in the question and answer period a little bit on the creation of the knife. But while we're on the subject, how is the knife used today, and what are some of the abuses of the knife?
Well, the knife is used today, and I want to back up just one step. You know, the folding knife came into play about 500, 600 BC, and that was found down in Austria, and it was called a Halestat knife. It evolved to about the 1600s, where the Spanish put a locking system in it, and from that day forward, it became a really nice, usable knife, and it continues to get there. The uses of a knife, if you ask somebody, you know, what's the most important invention ever made, they'll probably come up with the answer, you know, the computer, or the car, the airplane, the hammer. But actually, the knife was probably one of the most important, and it's arguable, ever made. Today, the problem that we're seeing more and more, up to this point, 99% of the people would carry a knife as they would carry a cell phone. What's transpired now with all the abuses of the knife, it's looked at upon now a little bit more controversial. And they're looking at it as a weapon first and a tool second, not a tool first and a weapon second.
When you say a weapon, do you have some kind of reference or some kind of statistics or something that could, put it in perspective of what we're dealing with?
Yes, yes. What they're doing, they're basing the stats now on what's recorded in the ER, what the police get reported, and that's about 43% of the altercations that transpire in the street, which is half of what happens. And a lot of it, when they start finding out who's carrying it, they based it on a 16, 17-year-old kids that are carrying the knife. And they say out of those kids that a lot of them admit to utilizing it and threatens people with their life with that knife. They say 47% of the school kids now carry a knife. And out of that 47%, 21% have threatened somebody. And that's a scary thought when you start looking at it. And that's anywhere from a folding knife to a kitchen knife. It doesn't matter. A lot of times in the earlier days, Julius Caesar, he got killed with a knife. Later on in King Louis in the 1600s, when they started becoming a little bit more civilized, I'd say, they started putting a blunt edge on the knife because they had the fork invention. Today, a lot of times when you have the gang leaders or you have the neighborhood tough guys, they incorporate a lot of younger kids and they carry the knives because it's easy to get, number one. It's not tough to get. Tougher to get a gun than it is a knife.
Wow. Et tu, Brute? Et tu, Brute?
I lost you on that. I didn't hear it.
It was basically a quote from Julius Caesar.
Ah.
Okay, is what I'm
trying
to say. So we're looking at, people now are carrying knives, but I see so much advocacy for Second Amendment rights in people carrying guns. Why a knife over a gun or vice versa?
A knife is a stealth weapon, and you're going to have an easier time carrying a knife. It's an up close, it's a personal weapon that has to be dealt with in a different manner. When a guy pulls a gun, you know what's going to happen. With a knife, most of the time they get within that 3-foot zone. We call it the red zone. You don't know what's coming, and it's coming in stealth, and it's coming in fast, furious, and the guy's on his way.
Wow. Well, then that takes us to the next subject, which is a little bit humorous for you and I were talking about earlier, but I have to have a lead in on it. So what the heck? For the fans of Clint Eastwood. What is the good and the bad and the ugly of the knives?
Okay. For everybody, the good, bad, and the ugly, I told Paul, I said, it's the not so good, it's the bad, and then it's the ugly. When you have a blade, there's not too much good about it. If you're on the receiving end of it, it's a tough one to defend on. Not saying it can't be done. It can be done. And I think a lot of the times when you're looking at defending on the knife, it comes in so fast, so furious. And the more you stand there and try to really engage in that situation, you run into a problem. They say you'll probably get stabbed 3 to 5 times every 5 seconds. That's a lot. You can probably deal with 1, maybe 2, and we call it wound management. When you have a major wound management, you can deal with a couple. When you start getting more than that, it's a bad thing.
So what is the survival rate of a knife attack?
Well, I've got to go on. Mr. White shared a little scenario with me about guns. And he says, and one of his students told him, he says, you got an 80% chance of living if you get shot once. You got an 80% chance of dying if you get shot twice. And I like that a lot. And then I looked in history, there was, with the weapons, number one, and they are so stealth, you don't know you've been cut, and you could be plunged without even knowing it. And I can't remember who it was, Queen something in London. There was a person that came up and had a needle type knife, like an ice pick, and plunged her right underneath the lung cavity. She was fine, thought, something happened, somebody bumped her. By the time she walked on the boat to leave, which was about 30 minutes later, she died. So, with a knife, you don't know you've been cut or how bad. So it varies where the slash took place. If you hit in the carotid arteries, 2 to 5 seconds, you're talking about, complete unconsciousness, depending how much adrenaline is running. You
Wow.
don't know that until you get into that.
So which is obviously a serious game. Actually, right now in London, there has been such an onslaught, no pun intended, of knife attacks. They were even trying to ban them. Now, let's talk about different types of knives. Now, I own many of them. Some of them are Hibben knives, which I'm very proud to say. They're beautiful pieces of art as well as weaponry. But I also have with me the famous K-bar, which the Marines used, which has been around for a hell of a long time. Folks,
A long time.
a lot of damage to somebody.
A long time, yes.
Yeah, and this was obviously issued from military use. My family were in obviously the Marines, and that's where that came from. But so let's talk about Marty. Let's talk about the different type of knives. Why don't you walk us through it so we become a little bit aware?
The single edge knife, and of course, this is a Hibben knife, which I love dearly. Derek, Wes, Gil, don't get mad at me, but I dulled the edge off, and I use it. But I love the weight, and it's a great training tool to work with. We utilize a double-edged training blade like this at the Inosanto Academy. I have sharp blades, double edge, and they do a lot of damage. And you have to get intimate with what the blade you're working with, because there's a different application when you have just a single edge blade working on it. The kukri, which was a weapon of choice in the jungles, let me see if I can get it in here.
Beautiful.
They'd utilize that with the 45, and they'd cut the brush as they're going through, and it was short enough that it didn't really get hung up as a big machete would, or a bolo sword.
So this was used in guerrilla warfare when we were fighting over in
Absolutely.
Asia. Okay.
Absolutely. A lot of the weaponry, a lot of the militaristic concepts they used at the time are written in red on the beaches and then washed away. They utilized the Filipino march to the max. I mean, it's been tried, it's been proven. We still use this, type of training process in the SEALs and the major military type sources, because they're a militaristic art, and it's deadly. It's a complete system that does cover it. And the Indonesian is the same way. It's a heavy bladed system, which really came into vogue about the 11th century.
Well, so we showed, okay, so is there any more knives you want to show us real quickly?
A ton of them.
Take us through them.
Okay, this is a karambit. This is used in the Silat system a lot, and takedowns is used in the attack scenario, and it's an extremely deadly knife. Another one I like too is just a simple little fighting type knife with the ring on it.
Interesting.
Okay, so we had that, and the knife that everybody likes to carry is just a simple folder. And this is a nice knife. I carry this one when I do use it. I don't carry it for self-defense, and that sounds kind of strange, but with all the laws and with all the situations that we have to deal with now, it makes it so you're going to end up in trouble a lot more. Guru Inosanto always told us, he says, I prefer my instructors don't carry a blade around. He says, you're going to end up using it faster than you realize, and you're going to end up in a lot of trouble. So that's been a deterrent for me. It's just a device. I mean, it's you have to go on your own conscience on that.
Do you have any suggestions for training, tips, ideas?
Yes. The training tips that we like to talk about is, we get people coming in to teach them, and we usually start them out and we talk about the reflection concept. And the reflection concept, it's like a mirror. You want to flow and mirror the energy that's coming at you. And that's an important, aspect of it. It's teaching you how to feel the motion. It's teaching you how to absorb that energy coming in, so you're not fighting it and forcing another angle to come in and slice at you. And that's a key factor. We always try to keep reaction ahead of anticipation. It seems like when anybody starts anticipating, a move, you're chasing after that technique and you're behind it, a quarter beat, half a beat, full beat at times, because you're thinking way too much. So we teach and we learn how to read, react, and flow with it. And the first thing is, you want to look, you want to assess what's going on. That's your first, clue. And that's when you're disconnected, we call it. But your eyes are connected to the situation. While connected, the other senses, are coming into play: your awareness, your attentiveness, and your ability to react. And I want to talk about attentiveness versus concentrated focus on this. Attentiveness is like a V looking out from you. The point of it is at you. That way you get a whole peripheral view of what's going on. A concentrated is going to be more the point going out in front of you. And you're limiting yourself on what could take place as far as the next movement coming in. We talk about unconscious competence versus cognitive understanding. Unconscious competence is more, you walk into the room, you flip a light switch on, you know what's going to go on, you don't really care, the works of it, versus cognitive understanding. A cognitive understanding is understanding how the electricity comes through the switch and goes out to the light bulb or the unit that you're utilizing on that.
Exciting. Can you have any ideas? Okay, you probably have lots of students and they're interested in Kenpo, but they're now gravitating toward the weapons. What do you do to help them to have a good foundation in weapons training?
What I try to get them to do in the weapons training is to get an understanding of flow and what could happen. If you're engaging in a Kenpo technique, and I still teach the Kenpo techniques for base to keep the system from where I was taught, and to keep it as pure as possible, and that's all subject to each person that's doing it. You have to let your own expression come out in it. What I try to do is I show the Kenpo technique, and then I'll give variations and options with the Filipino arts and with the Silat arts. That way they get a total understanding of the different thought processes as far as rules and principles. If we're going inside, like on Calming the Storm, we're more looking at a concentrated focus as we go into it versus a attentiveness. So you have more of a situational awareness that's going on in case something does go south, and you have a follow-up that you can go more into the Filipino. So we're inside in the Kenpo. With the Filipino, we want to gravitate to the outside and control that weapon and disarm it as soon as possible.
So you like to work in the Filipino martial arts on use of weapons to the outside of your opponent, versus where we will go both sides. We'll go inside and outside with open hand.
We go both sides in the Filipino arts, but we're aware of that backup weapon that could come, and we're training, to deal with that, continually. That way we know what to expect on that. So you have a better overview. If we can get to the outside of that weapon, that's ideal. If it's coming at us, we have the ability, if we want to go, just if it's coming at you, think 9 o'clock. You're going up the circle then, and you want to follow that. The different type of things that we didn't talk about too much was, you asked me earlier and I didn't address it yet, were the type of cuts.
Exactly. That was my next question. What kind, you have your weapon, you're using the weapon. What are the types of targets that you're looking to attack or counter?
If you look at the 8 basic angles attack, that's where you'll go most. If you see behind me the sword and the stick, those are the angles you'll probably utilize most in the Kenpo system, and the Filipino system is not that far behind. If you come from where the stick's at, straight down, we call that the San Miguel. That's the strongest strike, coming through, and and they call it the Archangels, so we start following that pattern in it. The type of slashes or cuts that can come through, there's a thrusting cut. There's a slash. There's a ice pick, which is an overhead, and doesn't have to go overhead either. It just comes from a backhand strike end or downward or any angle. The other is a fillet. Fillet meaning, you have to be situationally aware. If you're going to go on his arm, you know, you're not going to try to fillet him if he has a jacket on. It's going to change your method of attack, which is fine, but you have to know and be aware of that, and keep that situational awareness in play. There's the other ones are pushes with the knives. There's a whipping type motion, like we do a back knuckle, because it'll flick in. And then we have a plucking type motion too, where it pops it and starts digging into the skin from both angles, from outward, backhand, from an inward also. And those are the basic ones.
Okay, when you're talking about your angles, do you also try to incorporate open hand techniques, and then say, now if we were to put a weapon in your hand, similar application would apply?
Well, you know, the rules are going to change a little bit when you do go into the empty hand versus the knife bearing, you know, attacks. If you're the one doing the attacking, or vice versa, you know, if you're going to be defending off of that.
Okay.
You know, a lot of the times, and I was going to talk about that in the structure portion of it.
We can get into that in a few seconds if you like.
Okay.
Because
Yes,
I'm thinking about, okay, so you like to use the word zoning, okay?
You have a good memory.
And why don't you explain that to the people that are watching?
Well, you know, and I use the word zoning because that's the way it was handed down to me. And telling you a little quick story, you know, we were on the mat with Guru Dan one night, and he was talking about one of his teachers teaching him that when you're working a technique, you know, both sides, you know, you have a method of doing it, and they called it mitting.
They called it what?
Mitting. Just follow me through here, because there's a bigger story to it.
Okay.
So this went on for years, you know, Guru Dan, because I heard the word for several years, mitting. And then later he says, you know, I got to the point, this is Guru Dan speaking, he says, I was trying to figure out what mitting is. And he says, my teacher, and I don't know if it was Johnny Lacoste or one of the Tristramos, one of those main core teachers, he says, mitting. He says, this side, that side, mitta. And he was trying to say mirror and mitting, and Guru Dan played on and called it as a method and a technique of doing the other side, but now we call it mirroring. Okay, so now it was a nice deal. It was kind of funny.
Okay. So let's talk about footwork and your application of footwork with weaponry.
The method of footwork, we do a lot of the diamond footwork. If you were to lay down on a mat, and most schools have this on their mats anyway, they've got the 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 and 9s, and of course we cover the X in the middle. If you start walking that triangle and you start going up the circle, whether it's a step and the right side slides over, or if you're using we call this a male triangle, we call that a female triangle. So as you see the stick and the sword behind me, that would be following more as the female triangle. And looking at the triangle below me where my head's going down, that would be more of the male triangle. Now, as you start stepping that, if you start in the center, you'll start working the edges, you'll start working around your attacker, whether it be a crossover, you know, in rear, a crossover front, a step through forward. And I'm using Kenpo terminology because it's easy for us to attain. And I try to do that when we mix and match, because our Kenpo technology or terminology is phenomenal. And it helps in the Filipino arts where it's not as structured of a syllabus. It's a complete system. There's a lot of moving parts in it. But in our Kenpo world, you know, giving us praise where we deserve it, it makes it much easier from a learning standpoint and understanding if we can do that. So the zoning would take place, working the angles around and making sure your back leg is going to be fluid enough in case you have an attacker coming in, you know, that wants to either take you down or try to cut your leg. So you're moving it out of the way constantly, whether it be going up the circle around or vice versa. So you're continually, we work it on the mat. We'll draw out a diamond pattern, which is several different triangles on the floor, and you start walking it around an attacker. And then you get somebody in front of you that you can, you know, interact with that'll force you to move in a position that you weren't anticipating.
Does it get confusing for the Filipino martial arts when we use terminology that they're not aware of or not used to?
If we use it for them, yes.
What about them for us?
Them for us, I was totally upset for years, and I'd call Mr. Labonte, or I'd talk to Mr. Planis, and I'd be upset because I couldn't figure out what they wanted, and I had an idea, but it took me a while to really get a grasp on the understanding of the movement on it. But yes, the terminology, I think with our terminology, we have a better, I don't want to say better understanding, we have a easier written understanding on it. That way we could verbalize it easier than the Filipino arts, because we're pretty spot on when it comes to that. And I like that part. So that's why I do incorporate it.
So let's talk about the differences. Let's talk about the similarities, and then we'll deal with the differences and how we can fix or connect them together to get the most effective training out of it.
Okay, so and that's getting us more into the structural type thought process of this, and that's where I'm going to start going with it now. When we first teach a student, when they come in, we usually get their hands up. Hey, I don't want to fight. Hands are up, pushing out, or they're more in an extended out position. And these are real simple analogies that you can pick up and go with. The problem is that when you put that same movement into a Filipino world, that Filipino knife player is generally going to slice at your arms, or if you have a blade, they say, hey, take away the fangs of the snake, which is the hand, and then he can't bite you anymore. So that's what they're looking at doing. The other portion, when you get into the Filipino structure, we're bringing the hands a little bit more in tight and inside and exposing the back of our hand more. And the other part of it is, it's like a boxer when they keep in tight. We're protecting our organs from that knife being plunged at us. So it gives you another sense of protection as you're going. The others, you're going to step back to, a little bit more of a shallow, neutral bow. And I use that in both arts. It's like you have two deer, and the structure's got to be such that you put a protective area in front of you. The two deers are going to clash on their antlers continually. And what that does, it protects that deer from getting his organs cut or jabbed out, plunged out. And it's the same thing here. You're creating that protective zone in front of you to give you a little bit more protection as you do move forward.
Do you find Kenpo more structured?
Kenpo is more of a structured type environment. The Filipino art, and the way I like to define it is, in Kenpo, we had a lot of definitive boundaries in there. We're allowed to move around and do what we need to do as we do move forward. The Filipino arts, are more of a fluid, boundaried type environment, and I like that. That changes the perception of it. Can you see me, Paul?
Absolutely, I can see you.
Okay, I can't see me, which isn't a bad thing. Be nice to me. Be nice. I'm very sensitive.
Well, you know how to work in the dark anyway, so what the heck?
Well, sometimes.
So we see what similarities. What are the biggest problems or differences between Kenpo and Filipino fighting arts using a weapon?
The biggest differences are this, and this is what I've assessed and seen, from several different instructors, and I ask them questions how they would handle, similar Kenpo techniques, and I've been able to do that, and it's been a blessing that they share their knowledge with it, because there's things, no one person knows everything, but let's face it. So I think the more we keep as a perpetual student, the more information we'll bring back to our Kenpo family, which ultimately that's where we want to be. We want to share and make our Kenpo community strong. So the differences are this. You start looking at the Kenpo techniques, you're working inside a lot. You're not really controlling that weapon as well as you should be to set it up for a disarm, after the assessment is made. And that's a huge difference. I mean, in the Filipino world, we structure it to feel where we want to place that weapon for control and then a disarm, if at all possible, as soon as possible. We don't want them to have the knife and continue on with that.
Okay. What are some of the principles that Kenpos violate, or the teachings of Kenpo violate in the Filipino martial arts?
I think the biggest violation right now is my kid coming to get my knife to go play with it. And he grabs the live blade versus the dull blade. Say hi to Mr. White.
Happy Father's Day.
Oh, man. He makes it worth it sometimes. And sometimes, well, it's like, I got to say, Mr. White told me one time, he says, just think all the stories you're going to have in 10 years. Well, I'm hitting up there pretty good now. So. Okay, back to the violation of the rules and principles. A lot of times we'll leave that weapon in the Kenpo world in the hand, and we'll go around it for basing a category completion, within that move or towards that movement. In the Filipino martial arts, their concern is to assess it, to control it, to disarm it, to do what you need to do. Now, just because you disarm somebody, and we have to keep this in mind, the highest level of martial arts is to preserve life, not to take it. And do we train that we could? Yes, we could. But that doesn't mean you're going to go out and have to pick up a knife and go plunge somebody. You want to get an awareness. You want to learn how to stay away from it. So these are concerns that we need to look at. The other one is the Filipino arts. When they're doing that and they're assessing it, they're trying to get out of harm's way, and they're not, looking to over exaggerate their motion, because what happens when you over exaggerate your motion, if you're inside and you're pushing too hard and your body's starting to lean in too much, you may redirect and get what Mr. Parker does, create an unintentional orbit coming back. If your faces are blocking it and it comes around that corner and flicks your eye, plucks at your eye, it doesn't take much to take you out of that fight. So these are concerns that the Filipinos look at in detail on weapon, handling and control.
I see. So let's talk about some of the drills that you work with, or how you make somebody aware of how to deal with a knife attack.
Yeah. Number one drill. Everybody's seen the movie Forrest Gump?
Sir?
Run, Forrest, run. And I don't say that lightly either. The biggest thing is to keep away from getting in that situation. We talked earlier about how when you're disconnected, you're using your eyes to connect with the situation, if at all possible. And there's things that you can't control. When it comes in stealth, that guy's not considered a martial artist, which he doesn't have to be. It can be an untrained person. It can be a trained person. It can be anybody that has a knife in their hand and he's acting with no integrity in the role of, more or less, and this is what's been taught to me, as an assassin. I mean, he's going to kill you. And that's a tough one.
So let's walk through that, Marty. Let's walk through the scenario. You just got done buying something. You're walking out of the store. You've got your wallet put away. One of your hands is carrying the objects that you bought. All of a sudden, you're confronted out of nowhere. An assailant jumps up, demanding your wallet or is going to attack you. What is the scenario basically going to present itself as?
Number one, you want to have empty hand skills. I'm an advocate about that, and it's been tested, tried, proven. You're gonna want those skills. Number two, if an assailant comes up and he has a knife and he's got it displayed for you, he's brandishing that blade in front of you, they're working under a sense of urgency because they want your money, they want your bags of goods, they want your wallet, they want something you have immediately. And there's no proven stats on this from everything I've researched that they won't kill you or won't attack you, even if you do give them your goods. Is it better to give it to them and hopefully you can talk your way out of it? Absolutely. Is it always going to work? No. Do you need to be prepared in case he does come in? Yes. How are they going to come in? Generally, if the knife's out, most of the attacks are going to come right-handed, and the left hand is going to be for a grab or for a zoning to keep distance on you or to grab you and plunge you.
Is it going to be, well, first of all, their mindset is probably very, the adrenaline is flowing.
It's flowing
extremely agitated. You're caught off guard, where this goes back to Parker's 8 considerations. Awareness is being number one, then environment. You got to be aware of what's going on. You can't walk out there, folks, with blinders on. You're going to end up dead. Okay, so we know that. So the guy or the gal comes at you. They don't have to be an expert. They are obviously desperate because they are using a weapon against a human being with the premise that that person they're attacking or assaulting doesn't have a weapon. But as you just said too before, 47% of the people are carrying some kind of weapon too. All right, so
a lot of it
could end up bad for the other guy real quick.
It could. A lot of times, they're going to, and we do, we utilize an X block more than we should. The problem is with the X block with the Filipino guy, and we treat everybody on the street like they have weapon experience. And that'd be like, you want to treat them, that they're a trained person with that blade and they know how to cut you. And it's like Mike Tyson. He trains for the duration of the match, when he's going into for that fight. If he ends up in the first round, halfway through, all the better, his lucky day.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we need to watch a lot of the scenarios where we're used to doing, an X block, because what they're going to do, they're going to pull and slice immediately because you've given them the reason to follow up. A lot of times, and I don't want to get into the lesson part of it so much, depending on how they're coming at you, we'll go to the points of origin to stop that as best as we can and to eliminate the threat to move on, if we have to. Eyes are a good target. You want to take their eyes away. If they can't see you, they're going to have a tougher time. But then you have to be aware they're going to start flailing that blade recklessly.
If they come at you, in all likelihood, they're going to do probably, if they're not trained, they're just going to flail probably.
They're probably going to flail, or they're probably going to thrust, do a lot of thrusting, in and outs a lot, or just waving the blade in front of you to keep you back. Because, that's going to start telling you, hey, they don't really want to hurt you that bad. But they may.
A few weeks ago, we had Richard Post. He was there talking with you, and he had been stabbed several times and shot at.
Mm-hmm.
And so why don't you tell us about, how do you deal with these kind of scenarios? Give us some drills or some examples of what would work for the novice weapons student.
Okay, the key drills that we start doing is we start doing flow drills, and we'll start them out with a smiley face, we call it, just easy, and making your body turn from a cat one side to a cat the other, and letting it flow without a backup weapon coming in at you. So you're going to get used to that first level. We have a learning triangle, and the top of it we call cooperative, and that's more learning the information, teaching it to you, going Tai Chi style, until you can start going up to a little faster pace and challenge. After that, we'll drop down to the corner, and we call that the competitive, learning portion of the triangle. There you pick up the pace a little bit more, and you start adding a backup weapon, and you start going to different height zones, with that blade to start challenging the person with the empty hand. So he has a better understanding of how to react, and if it comes at you, and that's an important perspective of it, is when we start putting and incorporating the lower body into it, and we start putting the backup weapons, and we start pressuring the person back and forth. Then we're getting more in the combative, the sparring portion of it, where we're going to start going a little harder, a little faster, until we've reached that point that we've agreed upon. And if we say, hey, we're going to start doing more of a free flow, and then we start applying it. So it's a lot of passing. It's a lot of point of origin stopping. It's a lot of redirecting. It's a lot of stopping in between the motion and the flow till you can get the point of a disarm and control of that weapon as you go. So we teach a lot of that. And that goes back to the reflective, concept that we talk about, because you want to see what's in front of you. You want to reflect that energy, redirect it, and then take it for your own.
You want to, and then obviously control the weapon at that point.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
And then obviously, do you use a lot of trapping methods? Do you do combination strikes and Do you lower weapons, natural weapons against the opponent at the same time you're
Yeah,
using?
absolutely. Everything is open game. I mean,
Everything's on the table, what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like Mr. Parker said, all fair and love and war. You can't kick a woman there, and you can't kick them on the bottom of their feet. A lot of that applies in the Filipino arts. The Filipino arts it's a complete art. I mean, they have projectile weapons. They carry more than one knife usually when you get a good fighter, because they'll throw one at you for distraction as they're plunging you with a backup one. So there's a lot of things that we don't even talk about and discuss in our Kenpo world, which I think we should be aware of it at the very least to get a better understanding of what could happen. And more you see now, the Filipino arts are coming more into play. Probably one of the biggest controversial blades that have come around as of lately was the karambit. And that's a combat weapon. It's meant to kill somebody. There's no doubt about it. It is brutal and it is effective to the max. The Silat system, versus a jiu-jitsu system, which I think every system's good. It's a practitioner, what he gets out of it, and eventually what he can have his own self-expression for his own art come to play, I think is a key component there. But with the Silat versus like a jiu-jitsu, Silat has no tap outs. The break usually takes place before the body hits the ground. And that's a fact. And two bodies can't occupy one spot. And that's some of the base thought processes when you put that. Our Filipino arts, we have some Silat in there, which is very helpful in that. And like I say, it's a full-blown system, empty hands, flexible weapons. You can use your scarf. You can use anything that you can get your hands on. And going back one step earlier, if I may, you asked how would you handle it? You may have a situational weapon that could come into play that you could use. You may have a book in your hand. You may have a newspaper. You may have a jacket on you, a belt. So if a bladed attacker's coming at you, you should be aware of what you can use. You may have a pen in your pocket. Anything can be utilized as a weapon if you're aware of it.
This is the 30th anniversary of Mr. Parker's passing, and he was in the development of use of weapons and developing that, because it had been such a sort of ignored subject matter for some time. There's been a big void. Do you think that Silat has actually filled that void, and other systems have come in to say, listen, we need to address this. This is really important?
I think going back to not limiting it to Silat, I think with all the other martial arts coming more into play now, and with the internet being, available to you, so you have a better, at least look at history and look at what the trends are now, as we start moving forward and we start establishing new landscape, there's a lot of things that we still use. And I go back to the analogy, old is forever new. We're still listening to music nowadays. Before, it used to be on a 33 record, then it changed over an 8-track, then a cassette, MP3. Now you get the music out of the cloud. It's still music. It's still brought forward this day, but it's been improved upon. And I think in our Kenpo, and this is my take and what I'm seeing with it, I think the more knowledge and understanding we can get within our Kenpo world is going to enhance our movement. You asked about the Silat. I like the Silat for the fluidity of the motion of it. It's very nice, and it really complements what we do in our Kenpo. And I add it to, our Kenpo periodically, and sometimes more than not. I like the Filipino arts for some of the thought processes. It's a very fluid art, and it gives you a vast understanding of a variety of different weapons coming through that, which is extremely important.
Well, the beauty of it is, as you use that reference, is that the technology or the method of communicating has evolved, but
Yes.
The message has always stayed the same.
Same music.
It conveys one human being to another. And so,
Yes.
Like you said, you went back, you look at the way we'll use phonographs from the old disc, from radio to phonograph.
Yes.
To a 78, to a 45, to a 33, to a cassette, to a 8-track, to a CD, and now, like you said, we're into using downloads and things like that. So,
And
we're evolving with this, and obviously the message has to be continued to be presented. So let's talk about some of these things that we're doing right now with it. And I'm going to do this, Marty. I'm going to have you say a few more words before I go right into a question and answer with our participants. So when I call your name, please unmute your microphone and you can ask a question to Master Marty Zaninovich and let him answer it and relate it to the things we've been talking about. And so we'll look at, so Marty, final thoughts, regarding before we go into the Q&A.
I'm an advocate of continuing to be a student. I think the more information that you could bring into the system, it's going to allow you to express yourself in your own way. I always remember, Mr. Brown say, hey, you know what? Get to the point where you can put your own signature on your art. And I believe that truly. If you listen to the national anthem, how many different variations of that same song are there? And that goes on with variations of songs. So it allows you to sing the same song, but you get to put your own expression into it. And it doesn't get much better than that. I think what it does, every 5 years, you need to reinvent yourself. And with that being said, we're not getting any, I don't want to say older, we're getting mature, every 5 years, but our bodies are changing. And if we keep working out, if we keep consistent with our education, it's going to change. We're not going to be doing jumping, spinning, hook kicks unless you're a Benny Ukitis or someone like that. It's going to evolve. Those are gifted people, and they're always going to have their place, and they're great role models for us. But for us, every 5 years, if you keep it up, your slide will continually go down gradually and not fastly. And I think you need to challenge yourself. And what I like to do with the art, when you ask the comparisons, I show the options. I want to plant a seed that'll create questions so you start discovering on your own. Like Guru Dan always tells us, you'll learn more from discovering than you will from me teaching you on how. Nobody wants to be taught, but everybody wants to learn. And I think that's, part of the equation as we do move forward on that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. And
two things on that. One, aren't we discovering when we're being taught?
Well, it's a method of how you're taught. I mean, if you're under the gun and somebody's demanding it of you, which a lot of old schools is that way. And sometimes, we all end up in there. I think as you're sharing your information and allowing that person to make mistakes, because you need that room to fail. You need to fail forward. And I think that's real important, how the message is conveyed for the student. So, you look at that student, can you make him better or help make him better on the pathway? Because all we are guides. It depends how good a guide we are and how well we can explain the landscape around us so they can at least have an understanding when they move forward and make mistakes.
Second thing is, I reference back to the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to the Star Spangled Banner, okay? Do we need to go any further with that? All right.
We don't need to go any further with that.
Let's go to the question. Q&A with some people. We're going to go right down the list. When I say your name, please unmute your microphone and ask a question of Marty, okay? So let's start off with Brian Duffy. Hello, Brian. Why don't you say hello to Master Zaninovich?
Hello, Marty. How you doing?
Good, Mr. Duffy. How about you?
Good. My question has to do with, the formula for dealing with a weapon is always divert, seize, control, disarm. When you look at the techniques as they are in the manual, it seems like our Kenpo techniques as they're written don't follow that pattern. And I was wondering what your opinion was on that and ways that you would find to improve that.
And that's a great question. And it's one that it plagues us, because if we do follow the manual and follow the book, and that, number one, we chase after a technique when we start implementing that thought process. My opinion on it from what I see. I think what needs to be done when that move is coming in, explain to the student, here's some options on it. Here's how the written version of it is. And then show them the value of the change. And we call them soplets. Soplets meaning a quick strip, you know, from what we have in our Kenpo written by the book. It doesn't go into a quick disarm. And you can show them how we're breaking rules and principles with that, even in our Kenpo world. You know, and I do sometimes is I put a knife in their backup weapon, or I tell them to punch with that backup weapon. Because if you're doing calming the storm and you didn't get that growing kick, or you didn't bust his nose good, you know, you better have a backup. And if you get plunged by accident, dead's dead. So I try to give that awareness level with that. So it's faster to get rid of the weapon versus what is written.
Let's go to AC Rainey. AC, are you there? Why don't you say hello?
I'm here, sir. Hey, Marty, how you doing, man?
Good, brother. How about you?
I'm so disappointed that we're not going to have you up here in the Northwest this year at the camp that we're having. I would love to be back on that floor with you. I'm looking forward to picking your brains because I really want to know just how much of an influence that the Filipino arts, fighting arts, may have had on Mr. Parker during the day. I remember back in the day, Mr. Parker used to teach about knives, and everything that you're teaching, you know, we would have, instead of that thing, he would talk about free fighting, and we would start off by hitting the guy's hand and then hitting the guy's forearm and the whole 9 yards. And from my point of view, that you're just talking old Kenpo school to me. So I'm so proud just to be able to see you all the time, and I can't wait till we get back on the floor, man.
I'm looking forward to AC. I miss you, and I feel bad that I couldn't get up there. I was looking forward to getting up there with you and working with you and having some fun times. So but we'll have to do it the next time. I will be in Portland if everything goes well, or not Portland, but in Corvallis on the 20 or the 10th of September with Lou Donadio over there.
That's not too far. I'm looking forward to it. Let me know. I'm going to try to get down there to you.
Awesome. I look forward to seeing you.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, AC. Now let's go on to Andreas. Andreas, are you there, sir?
Hey, Paul. Hello, Sifu.
Hey, Andres, how are you, brother? Good,
good. Very good.
Big hug.
Hey, yes. No, in question of the system, nothing, Sifu. We are talking about the system every week. I only say thank you for your support in my education. You are my big brother. I hope you have a great Father's Day with Tyson.
Thank you very much, Andres. I look forward to seeing you. I miss you this year in Sweden, but I got to see you in Chile. That was good.
Sifu. Always is an honor to me see you again, Sifu.
Thank you, Andres.
Thank you, Andreas. Let's move on over and say hello to Senior Master of the Arts, Bob White. Bob, are you there?
I am, Paul. How are you?
Say hello to Marty. You know him well.
I certainly do. Marty, how are you?
Yes. Good, Mr. White. How about you?
I'm doing good. Good. I've got a question for you. Of all the different arts that you've studied, and you really have put a great education, which one is going to work best against Tyson as he gets older?
You know, I can share that with you because you have been. It's good that I can come and vent with you, and you give me a good guideline to follow, and I appreciate that. I think today my cousins were at their house up in Visalia. They just got a new puppy, and it's a big cage. I think the art of caging him may be the best avenue to take.
Totally understand. Well, I sure look forward to as things start opening up. I hope to see both of you back at the school soon.
I can't wait to get on the mat again there. I have a blast when I go over there and train with you. It's just a fun time for me, and I really appreciate you allow me to come in there and play.
Thank you, Mr. White. Let's move on down here to Chuck from Chandler. Chuck, are you there?
I am here.
Well, why don't you say hello to Master Marty Zaninovich? Got a question or two?
Thank you very much for giving us our talk today. And my question is one of curiosity. I was wondering, in the Filipino arts, you talk about, they do address the empty hand disarmament of a knife, but I suspect that they also do some training with weapons on disarmament. Can you touch base on that?
Absolutely. In fact, that's a great question. In our training that we do, what we do is we do empty hand to knife, knife to knife, knife to stick, stick to stick. We use swords, we use staffs, we use every mix and match type of weapon that you can imagine, from flexible weapons back to the empty hand. So we're intermixing that pressuring, that testing of all different type of scenarios, that if we can explore the combative world of what could happen, what that'll do for a person is raise their success ratio up when and if they have to utilize their skills. And we want to give them the highest success ratio that we can give them through this combative awareness level. So that's a great question. Yes, and we do intermix every weapon you could think.
Thank you, sir. Let's move on to Claudio Soto. Claudio, why don't you say hello to Master Zaninovich? Claudio.
Hey. Hello, Marty. How are you?
Hey, good, Claudio. How about you?
Yeah, I'm fine. And you? It's okay
Good.
for you? Okay. Well, it's a pleasure always here to you, learn to you, and thank you very much for the information and your vision about the martial arts and Philippine martial arts. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you.
Do you have a question,
Okay,
Claudio? No question or no? A question for...
Similar to the question to Mr. Chuck Saunders is answering to Marty.
Yeah, Claudio and Andres, they question me all the time when I see them, so they've got plenty of questions.
Well, I appreciate that. Let's move on over to the Hibbins. Let's start off with Derek Hibben. Are you there, Derek?
I am here. We're all here.
You're all there.
Hey,
Is it all
Gil, how are
the
you?
Gil Hibben?
Yeah.
Y'all under the Gil Hibben section or what?
Hey,
There
Marty.
we go. Look at
Hey,
that.
Derek. Hi, Gil. How are you?
My gosh, it's Wes,
man.
Gil, and
wanna know,
Derek.
If you know anywhere to get a good night.
Yeah, I still got your knife. I didn't mean to dull it. Huck got on me. He says, "What are you doing to that knife, boy?" I said, "Hey, I need it. You said get a real one and dull it." I did. Yeah, I know. I should have. But why not have the best training blade?
Look at Gil. Look at that smile. It's
Yes,
good to see you. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I like it.
I just love it. You know, I really enjoy talking to your sons, but it's really an honor to see you. You know, we need to see you more often.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
You know, it's fabulous. So, gentlemen, why don't you speak on behalf of your dad? Any inputs on, thoughts about knife making, the evolution of it? Because Marty talked about it, but he mostly talked about use. You create these pieces of art, and what inspires you to take metal and to form something that is one of a kind?
I'm going to pass this off to somebody that has a lot more experience than I do. Oh, I see. So he gives it to me. When I design knives and work with knives, I have to know the purpose of what the knife is. Every knife serves a purpose. You pick up a combat, you know what a combat's for, and that's nothing else. And so, like if I'm making a combat knife, I need to know what style and where he's going to be used, if it's military or whatnot. I have to do my research on what he needs for the knife to do.
Wes, can you move a little closer to the microphone for us or to the monitor and continue on?
It's probably a stupid mask.
There we go.
Is that mask going to help you in a knife fight?
Man, it'll make it where nobody can recognize me.
That's right. Oh my goodness.
Come on, folks, you got to admit you're loving this. This is a good one.
Hey, Wes, I love those practice knives you made over in Sweden. I still play with them.
You still need to send them back so I can do that correction on them for you.
Okay, I'll get them over to you.
Okay. And send me your other one back so I can put an edge back on it.
Oh. I'm afraid my kid will pick it up.
If it's like it, so you don't have to ruin a good night.
Okay.
I love it. You guys we could spend, we're looking forward to now that the family's back together, Gil. We're truly looking forward to getting you up here and have you, make a couple of comments on knives and how you've seen it evolved and the use of it. And you can tell us how not to get hit by a knife.
Thank you.
So listen. Anyway, God bless you, Wes, Derek,
Hey, Marty.
and Mr. Hibben. Thank you so much.
One last thing, Marty.
Yeah, Derek.
I think one of the big things that the big differences between the Filipino martial arts and what we do in Kenpo that a lot of people don't realize, I put it in the comments, is in the Filipino arts, we learn the drill, we drill the drill, we forget the drill.
That's it.
We put it
That's
into
it.
application. It's not so much of.
Let's move over to Eric Miller. Eric, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Why don't you say hello to Master Marty Zaninovich?
Yeah, Master Marty, how are you this evening? So my first question is, I am studying Uechi-ryu Okinawan karate, and I also do Bill Gregory, Kaju Kenpo, and I used to practice Fred Valeri's Kenpo. So, I'm trying to bridge the gap between those two. So any advice you have?
You've got a Kaju Kenpo, which is get down and get dirty with it, and getting into our world. I think the best thing is for you to feel how well suited you feel in whichever art. I know when I bridge arts, I try to intermingle the fluidity, so I'm seeing if it's going to enhance what I'm doing. I've kept my Kenpo as a core, which I believe in with all my heart. So I know the motions, I know the principles that are incorporated within that system. I'm learning more about them all the time. But I can take the Filipino arts because I see the angles and the fluidity. When I first, and you're talking empty hand to empty hand to empty hand, I get it.
Yeah.
But with the weapon arts, and if I put the empty hand Filipino art in there, it gives me more of a boundaryless, flow of where I want to go to the next position to attain. So if it's going to complement my movement and get me going around that clock and not going from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock without doing anything, I've got an issue there. So if I can fill in those gaps going around the corner by implementing, something different, or just picking it out of my Kenpo system, then I've done my job. So I think my bit of advice would be just look at your method of hitting. If it's, you do one and done, maybe that's the flavor of that art you're studying, or not, so I leave that with you.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate you being a part of it today. Let's go down the south of the border. Let's go down and see Rodolfo Kunstman. Are you there, Rodolfo, Mr. Birthday Boy?
I'm here, Mr. Paul Casey. Thank you.
It's good to see you. I know you're going to come on here and wow us with a question. Go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Zaninovich.
Hello, Rodolfo. Happy birthday to you. Feliz cumpleaños.
Gracias.
Yeah.
My question is, what's your opinion about the teacher to mix Kenpo, Filipino martial arts, in a one class, or you prefer the teacher to one class to only Kenpo and one class to only Filipino martial arts, or do you prefer mix, or what?
That's a good question, because I was always told, to make sure that I explain which art I'm bringing into play at that certain time. For a seminar scenario, I'll mix and match because I'm limited on time. But when I mix and match, I'll do a Kenpo technique. I'll give a flavor of Filipino martial arts, the empty hand into it. Maybe I'll put a blade into it. Depends on the situation. I may add the Jet Kundo, the free boundaried, flow, or I may put some of the slot takedowns into it. So, but I'm going to explain what it is. So I keep it separate. then I'll bring it together so the student understands what he's learning or she's learning, and it gives them the ability, if they want to continue on and study more so in a different specific art, that they'll keep it separate and they'll have at least an introduction to it, when they're doing it. If you have classes going on, like they do at the Inosanto Academy, they'll have the Filipino class, it'll last an hour. They'll have a Silat class, last an hour, Muay Thai, an hour, but they keep everyone separate there until it's a seminar type situation or a mix and match class, which we used to call phase, 1, 2, or 3 classes.
Rodolfo, do you have anything else you want to ask Marty?
No. It's the focus is about to learn, and what you learn, you separate this discipline.
Yes.
When I take a seminar, is mix or you practice only, because when you learn, I understand you separate.
Yeah. The ironic part is when you're going through one art, you'll probably encroach in a different art as you're going through it, and it'll look the same. Nobody will know. That's where it should be. It should be a consistent flow of motion where you're accenting the strikes and you're really being effective. And I use the word effective strongly, because if you're not, then we're just touching.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Good question there, Rodolfo. Let's go to one of my favorite guys, who is he has always something wonderful to say. Mr. Todd Durgan, first question for you. Where's your wife?
Hello, Master Z. How you doing?
Good, Todd. How about you?
First question was what, Paul?
Where's your wife?
Right there.
She is. Okay, good. Just want to make sure.
She wanted to remain anonymous today.
Anonymous. Okay. Stealth. Go ahead.
So good stuff, Mr. Z. Hey,
thank you.
I have a couple of things. First of all, let's recognize it is actually Benny the Jet's birthday today. So happy whatever number he is.
Yes, it is.
Since his name was brought up, and happy birthday to Mr. Rodolfo. So I'm curious because I know you have a lot of experience in the Kenpo training system. Oh, first of all, to Mr. Hibbins' point about training, learning, and forgetting, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, I think that the techniques that we learn and do should also be should be done somewhat akin to that. We can train them, we learn them, but in the heat of battle and combat, we should forget about that and move in and around whatever it is that we need. Somewhat like the Collier Nice, am I correct?
Yes. What we usually say is, we drill the drills, we forget the drills, and Derek is 100% right on that, and that's the way we do train it. In our system, when we go through our Kenpo techniques, a lot of the times we get caught up, and not always, because we're teaching it all the time. We follow the base version of it. And you're 100% right. You should forget it. If you start chasing a technique, you're going to be behind it, a quarter beat, half a beat, full beat. And by that time, you're being, more in an anticipation type mode versus a reactive type mode. And once you're in the reactive type mode, that's going to cure, a lot of that chasing of the technique. We don't want to chase after a technique, whether it's our Kenpo, Filipino, Silat, JKD, any type of art. You want to make it, and it goes back to that unconscious competence where you go in, you flip the switch on, you got light, versus the cognitive understanding where you have to go in and you want to learn it. It's Bruce Lee's adage, you learn a front kick, then you start breaking it down, you learn the mechanics, and after that, you throw it away, it just becomes a kick again. And I think that becomes more the unconscious competence level where we want to be.
So before Paul cuts me off because my time's up, my other question was, I was curious, in your opinion, at what point in a student's journey through the arts, and I say the arts because hopefully they study many facets in many arts, do you believe that a student should start to be more aware and be practicing some of those Filipino and Silat concepts to be a more effective combatant?
I think if you teach them that, and this is my opinion on this, and from what I've picked up, I see a lot of the kids that have come up at the Inosanto Academy, And the kids that come up, they do multiple arts at once, and I don't see it detract from their abilities. They've given themselves a more open book to learn. In our Kenpo world, Guru Dan has had me, get up and demonstrate how a structured system, looks, and then has me apply it. And of course, when we apply it, we free flow, and we try to make it so there's no coffee breaks in it, and it looks like a technique similar to what they're doing, so there is no break in the action. So back to your thought process, I think it's totally dependent on the student if they're capable of learning and have that ability to bring in and assess and digest. I mean, you could acknowledge it, but if you don't internalize it and become part of that movement, it's never going to be. They're learning so much information, that structured syllabus in the Kenpo world versus bringing in the Filipino arts where you're showing them how to flow. I think with that fluidity, I think with that lack of syllabus and structure, it's like the JKD world. Mr. Parker was structured and brought the syllabus. Bruce Lee used what's necessary and discard was not. So I think it's how you approach it and how you can implement it in. And some people won't be able to attain that much information coming, and it depends on them how much time they have to allot to it. It is a perishable skill, and if you don't attend to it and keep the maintenance up on everything you're doing, you're going to fall behind, and you may overwhelm that student too.
I like that. It's a perishable skill. I like that. It's a perishable skill. Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Todd.
Being a part of this. And thank you.
Hey, George. Hi, everyone. Hi. How are you, buddy?
We're going to get him up here real quick now. So as everybody knows, tomorrow is Father's Day. So to all the fathers that are watching and out there in Kenpo land, and Batman, right? You want to say hello to everybody? Anyway, so George wanted to say hello to everybody before we got too far in. So we have time for pretty much one more question, and I'm going to turn it over to the Golden Dragon if he's available. Mr. Dennis Knatz, sir. Are you there, Dennis?
I'm here.
Where are you?
I'm here. Hi, Georgie.
There you go. There he is.
Hey, Marty, I'd like to comment on some of the stuff we've been talking about.
Please.
I prescribe to
I can say, I love you.
I love you, Batman.
I love it, Batman.
Okay, take it again. Take two.
I love the following of: you train to learn, you learn to forget, and you forget to become instinctive. And I know that's what everybody's basic mantra was. And so becoming instinctive is the object. You can't try to think about what's going on. If you try to think about what's going on, it's not going to work. You're going to be caught thinking, and you're going to be stuck with something that you don't want. And that's whether it's empty hand or that's whether it's with blades.
Totally
my one thing with Mr. Parker, one of his disagreements with the Filipino system was that a lot of times there's a lot of crossing over. And if you're using particularly double blades, he said you never want to cross blades. You want to go blade to blade, not crossing blades. Your thoughts on that?
And there's a lot of validity to that too, because when you start crossing blades, you start to open yourself up for a cut yourself. So you want to try to stay on the outside of it as much as possible and not cross. So I totally agree with that.
So yeah, I know that was one of the things. As always, it was a great thing. These kind of training things are so effective. Unfortunately, the best way for me to learn with you, I want to attack you.
Paul, here we go.
Is that really the thing you want to say?
And I'm going to get cut up, but you know what? That's the way to learn. Like you said, is to make mistakes and learn from those things and really learn what's going on. And so I know I would be cut to ribbons, but that's the whole thing. When okay, I see why that doesn't work.
Wait, it was so funny, and I go back to Mr. Labonte. He came up with Alan Henderson one day, and I was teaching at a camp up there, and they wanted to play with the knives, and I've got these electric shock knives. So, Sigung's sitting there, and I wanted to play with Sigung because I wanted to shock him. He looked at me, he says, "Z, forget it. Henderson, get out here." He said, "You shock him up good."
Yeah, throw him under the bus.
Gosh.
Boy, that's always Sigung's thing. I'm going to throw him under the bus. I'm going to make advancements by other people's mistakes.
That's exactly what he did too, and it was funny. It was pretty wild. We were with the electric knives. You're right. I was sparring with one of my instructors down at the academy. And this guy had 3 tours of duty in Nam. He was a chaplain for the LAPD. He's passed away since now, and I love the guy dearly. But we finished sparring one day with those electric shock knives, and we were just wringing wet. And, you know, I thought we finished, and we bowed, and he snuck up on me, and he shocked me right in the seat of my pants. And I had these thin nylon shorts on, and I jumped in the air, and there was class going on at the Inosanto Academy. Of course, everybody stopped. They're laughing. And the guy that got me, Mike, he never laughs. And we're sitting there. He had tears in his eyes. He was laughing so much. And one of the other instructors says, "You turned your back on Mike Weiss. What were you thinking?" I said, "Obviously, I wasn't." But it was a fun story. But it'll get you.
Well, I want to say it was a very enjoyable interview and session and learning session. And thank you again for being you and for sharing all your thoughts and experiences.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, that wraps it up for us. I want to say on behalf of everyone that has been watching here today, sir, it has been, you know, very informative. You're an amazing individual. Your talent is only exceeded by your humility. You're just a good person, a great dad. I wish you the very best. I hope that we can have you back in the future for other interviews and whatnot. And I encourage everybody to go to Marty's page, Facebook page, and ask him personal questions. He'll do the best he can. And with that, I'm going to open it up. I would like everybody here to say hello and say goodbye. We're going to unmute everybody. And thank you very much, Marty.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Kenpo Hall of Fame, you know, educational video series, you know, what can I say?
Marty.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Love you, baby.
Love you too.
Seems appropriate because don't text and drive.
She's holding it.
Are you texting, Derek?
God bless everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless.